Hey everyone, the Podrat here. This is the feedback video, feedback/tweak video for exercise number 2, drawing a sphere. So I'm just gonna dive right into it. Same format as last time. The right side will be the one that I'm gonna be tweaking. So we're gonna look at the first one in no particular order. I think this one is by Stacy. Realism-wise, it works very well. I'm going to tweak a little bit here and there, just give the shape a little bit more definition, because there's two issues here that I can see. One, there is a giant front curve at the front of the, or should I say the left side of the sphere, which makes, unless it's up against a wall or something like that, if it's on a flat surface, right, that doesn't make any sense for that line to be there. And also the back of the sphere is kind of blurry, so we want to clarify that and add some clarity and contrast between where the sphere ends and where the background begins. Now, it's sometimes for some things that you draw, you know, maybe there's mist in the air, maybe there is maybe the form of the sphere gets more and more ethereal and translucent, and just as it goes towards backwards, that's where you would use this kind of effect. Although I don't think that's the intention here, so I'm just gonna tweak those. I'm also gonna make the shadow a little more defined, but overall it's good. Great work. Okay, this drawing by Michael. It's a good drawing. You have a nice gradient going on. It looks like a sphere ball, definitely. To push this further into, you know, to make it more realistic, like I said, and people probably notice this by now, you're using a lot of lines around that ball to give it a definition when you don't need to do that anymore. So all I'm going to do is just get rid of anything that resembles just a line by itself to define shape, and using only shapes and you know, like contrast between two different tones. And I might make the ball a little bit smoother in the process. Not that yours is not good, but the reflection light you have on yours. So I'm just gonna reduce that a little bit and make the shadow a little bit smoother. And hopefully you can tell the difference. Just remember, often reflection light, especially on a drawing like this, is extremely subtle, and it does not extend all the way to the other side of the ball, like just start somewhere then extend all the way to the end. It falls off, so there's always like a smooth curve between where it starts, then it's reflection light, and then it falls off into the shadows and to the edge of the sphere. But yeah, you are able to create a very convincing, you know, illusion of a sphere already, so your tone control is good. Just make sure that don't use lines to define the shape unless you have to, which most time you don't. Alright, this one is submitted by Westbrook, and I just remember, like, in terms of realism, you know, the rules of realism, there's not much to really correct in that sense. So I didn't bother making like two images for that. There's two little things that I did tweak, and one is that reflection light is too strong. Unless, you know, the sphere is just like last one, unless the sphere is on something that's very, very reflective, which would changes the property of the shadow, which give me information that it's not. It wouldn't, the reflection light would not be that strong, and it would not extend all the way to the edge of the sphere. So this is the tone control stuff. So I can understand the difficulty. So I'm just gonna mess around a little bit with that, and I think that's about all that's needed for this one. So yeah, good job, Westbrook. Okay, this one was sent to me by Xenia, and I probably pronounced your name wrong. If so, let me know what it is. Feel free to insult me in the process. But in terms of the drawing, in terms of realism, it is what it, like, you did everything right. There's nothing, you know, unrealistic about it. You did not use any lines to you know, to create any form. That's the most important thing. So I think most of you are getting that now. But there are some things that I do want to you know, talk about, and I did make changes about it. You know, a sphere like that, unless if it's on a flat surface, it's not going to make a shadow like a teardrop. That's just not how light works. And I think that's about the only thing I really tweaked in this drawing. I made the ball a little bit rounder. I make the shadow a little bit more, like typical. But besides that, I think this is, it is what it is. It's a good job. Like even your reflection light was very faint, so which is good. I didn't want to get into too deep about the shading aspect of the drawing because that's not the point of this exercise. So I didn't change that much of anything else. It looks like a sphere ball and, good job. I did play around with a little bit of extra highlight, but that's for my own testing purposes more than anything else. It didn't really fit the sphere. For those curious, the sphere that we see here doesn't have a very reflective quality. It seems like, it has a very textured surface. So it makes no sense to have a highlight with such a sharp edge around it, especially like a square one for some reason. So that's why it didn't make any sense. Okay, this next submission is by Justin, and this is probably one of my favorite ones, but he says, "Behold my lumpy ball," which is true, but it is realistic, and this exercise is all about drawing something realistic, not necessarily have to, have the perfect form. And it reminds me of, like a pizza dough. That's exactly, because it's not perfectly round, but it's, you get that feeling. It's kind of texture like flour and just dough. I don't know. It made me hungry, but since he implied that he wanted the drawing to be less lumpy, that's the way I start tweaking the drawing. Even though in terms of realism, there's nothing there that I would comment too much on, other than making the edge of the shape more clearer. So let's make this from a pizza dough into a sphere. Alright, this one's a very nice one. The rendering is very smooth. Who is it by? Eric. Yeah, so I honestly didn't really think there's anything I need to change. I was just playing around with it. One thing I did notice, and this is a perfect demonstration where even if your drawing have texture, if you keep it consistent, you can still create a very convincing form of any kind. I think for this one, I just made the shadow a little bit clearer around the edges, and especially some of the dark lines, dark parts under the ball where there's no light that's getting in there. So I did that, and I messed around with the reflection light a little bit. Everybody seems to have some kind of problem with that to make that perfect. So I started playing around with that a little bit, but then I realized, this exercise is not really about that. I thought about explaining something about relative contrast versus overall contrast, but that's a topic for the next class basically. So one thing I did notice is that since he's using the background as white to contrast with his ball, it'd be more helpful if he just simply make the background even more brighter. So that's kind of what I did. And if you have a gradient on the ground, right, it starts out like at the bottom, just keep that gradient, but as you go up, you make the background wider, the form will come out even more strongly. But besides that, there's nothing else. This is a good drawing. Just make the edge of the shadow sharper, especially the parts that's closer to the ball. Okay, great job. Now this one is submitted by Randeep, and besides the shadow being a little odd, for the purpose of this exercise, there's not really much to comment on. It would have been very similar to tweaks that I've done before, especially that little bit of reflecting light on the bottom can be, although it's pretty good, it can be tweaked further, but overall it's a very good job. And I might circle back to this after the next class. Okay, this one is submitted by Justin again. It is kind of crazy. It's like a ball. Now it's definitely not on a flat surface. It's in one of those, curved gravity well kind of type of surface. So the goal is now how we're gonna make this. This gets into conceptual art, conceptual lighting territory. It's beyond just to make something look realistic. But nevertheless, I knew what he wants to do, so I just I look at the shape of everything and I just tweaked it to the point of what I think he wanted to represent with his drawing. I remember I talked about a lot of random stuff that's way beyond the scope of the first class, of just realism. But you know, one of the obvious things to point out is depends on where the light is, direction of light, which we know based on that bright spot. We know the curvature roughly, right? Behind it, we know where the shadow should be, instead of, you know, he drew the shadow a little bit too far away. And also, shadow of any object should be equal to or larger than that object in some dimension in one way or another, unless you use some kind of multiple light source trick, overlapping trick. The real shadows are always, well, almost always larger than or equal to the object in some dimension, width or height. And then I did a few reviews from last exercise from people who either new or didn't submit their drawings on time. And basically, it really all involves me just getting rid of lines. That's all. And any edge that is not sharp, they should be very clear and sharp. So that's what I did, and you can see that they become a lot more realistic as a result. And it's all pretty good. Nobody made any mistake that is too far off. And as a bonus, I like to do something that has nothing to do with the assignment. This is a drawing submitted by Justin again. It's actually a hook. Apparently, he told me it's made out of bone. Well, anyway, I made it into gold. So hopefully, it looks a lot more expensive. Maybe he can take to a pawn shop or something. So I hope everybody enjoyed this video. I think you are pretty much all ready for the next part, which is all about identifying and able to correctly execute on paper the value, put down the correct value for something. So I'll talk to you guys in the next class video. And, you know, have a great day. Cheers!